Today, one of the tragedies occurred in Scotland dealing with a product which may be interesting to you. I'm Merrell Williams, and I have been a tobacco whistleblower, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. It's called Legionnaires' disease, and the term itself comes from 1976 in the summer, where Legionnaires were meeting in Philadelphia. Some died, some didn't. But there was a conspiracy, a fairly large conspiracy involving the Center for Disease Control and the universal concept of the tobacco companies coming together and forming a union of deceit. I write about this in my book, Intent to Deceive, which was actually published illegally online in 1998, but I wrote about it in 1992. I looked very hard to find what was the meaning while I was working at the law firm Wyatt Tarrant Combs and Brown and Williamson for the terms that would put the code of Freon, which was in the taxonomy, into some kind of meaning. I never found out in 4 years, over 4 years working there, what Freon meant. Well, I found out what it meant. Freon was associated with Legionnaires' disease. And how? There were two things that were important in discovering this. First of all, in 1976, in the summer, the Legionnaires' disease broke out. There was, at that time, there was a very, very strong emphasis on the business of making the environment more acceptable and more less of the infiltration of foreign objects and trying to make a sense out of the ozone layer and the destruction of the ozone layer. Well, that had absolutely everything to do with what the tobacco companies had created, called G13. G13 was a formula where you had these giant uses of Freon, and this Freon was expelled into the environment, and it became part of the cataclysmic destruction of the ozone layer. That's part one. Now, the lawyers knew this, the people knew this, and when I had released documents years ago, I found out that nobody seemed to be interested in this subject. But today, when Scotland had 13 people killed, 13 people involved in a Legionnaires' disease outbreak, and one of them died, and some of them didn't. I did a longer piece, and it will appear tomorrow or the next day, about how this is related to mustard gas. The process of a conspiracy related to mustard gas, and years of deception. And even the medical community, the honest medical community, knew about this as a disease. They called it Legionnaires' disease. The funny thing about it, if it's funny at all, is the fact that the components of this actually did create a form of mustard gas. Mustard gas was used in World War I by both sides, the Germans and the British, in order to disable the lungs. Now, there was no question in the Legionnaires' disease that this was correct. In the Scotland case that came up today, this is so apparent, because if you follow the truth, of these diseases, it's always related to union carbide's Freon, the old type of Freon. And it happens every once in a while in cruise ships and so forth. But I'm going to talk about this at length. For now, I'll leave you with the thought, this is a nice blowing of the whistle on something that was given to people who are tobacco advocates out in California. Stanton Glantz, people who are with the AMA, people who are with legacy documents, and there seems to be, and had been, no interest, and perhaps they don't understand. But I have a feeling that if they read my book that I wrote in 1992, as they read the documents that were submitted, they might want to understand. But this is a very, very sensitive subject, because it is something that is a conspiracy. It's a new conspiracy, and it's an old conspiracy. It involves the medical world and the world of politics. And so I'm going to be talking about it at length in the next cut. Thank you very much. I'm Merrell Williams. I am, for good or bad, a whistleblower on the tobacco industry. Not that I have any problem with the tobacco industry. You've already agreed that you're going to accept them as killers, and that's what they are. But the other people who are advocates and health advocates, and they want to do something about it, I always question why they never pick this up. And so this is about Legionnaires disease and about Freon and a process called expanded tobacco G13, the code name, and what it did. Today, you have another example in Scotland of one of these infrequent events. And by the way, the champion of this cause, to keep up with keep abreast of everything, happens to come from a very strange place. Well, maybe it's not so strange. It's Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville, Kentucky is the house of tobacco, much like North Carolina used to be, or South Carolina. And while it is not well known, they seem to have centered around this and put it into perspective, because that's where it's controlled, the concept of Legionnaires disease, or Legionnaires disease. Somebody in Kentucky is keeping up with it, just like they did before. And by the way, that's the home of Brown and Williamson, and sort of the center of the universe of these sort of conspiracies. And I'll talk about this later. Thank you very much.